Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is the greatest Marvel movie ever made.
Tom, no, it's not true. How could you say that? You're so stupid.
I'll prove it to you. So far, there's been 32 Marvel movies, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 only needs to compete with 11 of them. Those 11 are Iron Man, The Avengers, Captain America Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers Age of Ultron, Captain America Civil War, Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, and Spider-Man No Way Home. Everything else Marvel's made has ranged from bad to acceptable. These 11 films are the standout for me and the only competition for this latest Guardians of the Galaxy movie. I'm going to systematically explain why Guardians 3 beats each and every one of these movies, but first, let me explain to you why Guardians 3 was so good. I'll make it really simple for you. It profoundly moved me. Past the action, the humor, and the style, this movie does what all great movies do. It moved me. And it's something an MCU movie has never done for me in the past. And this is coming from a guy who cried when Tony Stark died at the end of Avengers Endgame. Given the state of the MCU, I came into this movie with the lowest of standards. After a shaky sequel, James Gunn's firing and then rehiring, and numerous members of the cast telling us that this is the last time they're going to play this particular character, I didn't really have super high expectations for this. Oh boy, was I wrong. This movie is really simple. It's a quest to save Rocket, who's on the brink of death. They have 48 hours to save him, and while he's in a coma, Rocket has flashbacks to his time as a science experiment. And those scenes are gut-wrenching, to say the least. It culminates in a tear-jerking scene where Rocket's heart finally gives out and he sees his other science experiment friends in heaven. I saw this film in a packed theater and all of the jokes were hitting, not to mention my wife cried when Rocket died. Somehow, after all the MCU sludge of the last few years, James Gunn comes in and gives us a perfect Marvel movie to ceremoniously close the door on these characters. A few years ago, Martin Scorsese said that Marvel movies aren't cinema, and to a certain extent, I do agree with him. These films are about superheroes after all. You know, we need action, more action, and world-ending stakes every time. How much time can you really spend reinventing the formula, humanizing these characters, and getting the audience to relate to them? I mean, how can I relate to Captain America? The dude can literally curl a helicopter. In terms of sheer action, it's true that Guardians 3 can't compete with Avengers Infinity War or Endgame. In terms of scale, Guardians 3 can't compete with the wipe out half the universe plan that Thanos had. But that's not the yardstick that I'm using to judge the best MCU movie of all time with. Guardians 3 does something that no MCU movie has been able to do so far. It scared me. It terrified me to think about losing Rocket as much as it would a family member or a pet. I did not want to see this little raccoon die. It put the fear of God in me. We've seen these characters in a total of 7 movies so far. For comparison, Tony Stark was in 9 MCU movies. Working parallel to this plot is the knowledge that this is the last time that we're going to see the Guardians of the Galaxy. This story is about death, letting go, and the incredible power of friendship. And we know deep down that we have to let go of these characters by the time the end credits roll. And that's tough because we love them. We all know the powerlessness of watching someone we love die in front of us. This movie taps into that on a level I've never seen before in the MCU, even including the Thanos snap. So let's start the heavyweight matchup between Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and these 11 great MCU movies. Let's immediately and quickly disavow a couple of these, shall we? I'm going to disavow Iron Man, Captain America Winter Soldier, The Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers Age of Ultron, Thor Ragnarok, and Black Panther. I'm disavowing these immediately because these movies never hit the same emotional notes as Guardians of the Galaxy 3. The movies we have left are Captain America Civil War, Spider-Man No Way Home, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame. These films truly are the creme de la creme of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, let's pit Guardians 3 versus Captain America Civil War. Captain America 3, like Guardians 3, is a story about friendship. the friendship between Bucky Barnes and Steve Rogers, and Steve Rogers and Tony Stark. The final scene, when Tony finds out that Bucky killed his parents, is really sad and gut-wrenching. Steve Rogers, a shining bastion of morality, has to choose between protecting his guilty best friend or allowing Tony Stark the revenge that he knows he deserves. It's an impossible decision that makes for an unforgettable finale. The emotional stakes are high here, but I think that ultimately, Guardians 3 is more impactful because of the sheer amount of time we spend with Rocket and his flashbacks to his time as a science experiment. Captain America Civil War focuses on a lot of different characters. It even introduces a few new ones like Black Panther and Spider-Man, and so it's hard to really flesh out meaningful story arcs for every single character in these movies, right? I ultimately think the love we feel between the Guardians of the Galaxy in this movie trumps the animosity we feel between Team Stark and Team Rogers in Captain America Civil War. Let's talk Guardians 3 versus Spider-Man No Way Home. Spider-Man No Way Home was the emotional roller coaster that all great Spider-Man movies need to be. Aunt May dies, which came as a huge shock, and when all three Spider-Men convene for the first time and talk about who they've lost, it's gut-wrenching. Not to mention all of Peter's closest friends and MJ forgetting who he is by the end of the movie. Add to that the sheer joy of seeing Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man again, and you have one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. However, I think Tom Holland's Spider-Man movies missed a big opportunity in its first two entries. Tom Holland's Spider-Man is very whimsical and lighthearted compared to the more serious Tobey Maguire version of Spider-Man. I think with the Guardians of the Galaxy, every movie had emotional weight to it. And even in Avengers Infinity War, we got to see a new heartbreaking side to the relationship between Gamora and Peter Quill. I think that Spider-Man No Way Home could have hit harder if the first two movies in Tom Holland's Spider-Man universe weren't so lighthearted and didn't OD on that. I know the Guardians movies are lighthearted as well, for sure, trust me, but I think that James Gunn knows how to balance that with a lot of emotion. When Yondu dies in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, for instance, I think that moment is more impactful than any moment in Tom Holland's Spider-Man universe, even including in No Way Home. Let's talk Guardians 3 versus the Infinity Saga. This is Rocket Raccoon and Thanos in a boxing ring. Who's gonna win? Rocket is gonna win. Avengers Infinity War and Endgame deal with an Avengers squad who loses half of their ranks. The anger we feel at the end of Infinity War after the snap is almost incalculable. But is the snap really all that emotional? It's more shocking than emotional to me. When I saw Black Panther disappearing, I knew he'd be back, right? I mean, come on, they're not gonna kill Black Panther and Spider-Man after their first movies. What's sad is the Avengers' reaction to who they've lost. Remember when Peter Parker evaporates in Tony Stark's hands? Yeah. That's sad because we know that Tony Stark feels responsibility for Peter. We don't really know Peter up until this point, but we're sad because we know that Tony is sad. To me, that's the most emotional part of the snap. In Guardians 3, the moment when the crew loses Rocket is more impactful. Why? Because these characters had more time together. Not just 2 movies in the case of Peter Parker and Tony Stark. They've had 6 movies together. Their relationships were fleshed out more. Not to mention, we cared about Rocket more than we cared about Peter Parker. Infinity War and Endgame also focuses on a lot of different characters at one time. In reality, it might be said that the most emotional part of Infinity War is when Thanos throws Gamora off the cliff. Also, what about the moment when Peter Quinn decides to pull the trigger and kill Gamora? Or when he finds out Gamora died? Why do all of the most emotional moments of Infinity War include the Guardians of the Galaxy? Let's tackle Endgame. Without the Tony Stark sacrifice, Avengers Endgame would have been an emotional wet fart. We got Fat Thor, blobbering Ant-Man, and Korg. We see Black Widow sacrifice herself, which was meaningful, but I honestly, I didn't really care. But that doesn't mean there weren't impactful scenes. I mean, remember when everybody came back through the portals again? That was awesome. Seeing T'Challa come through the portal was brilliant. And watching Captain America wield Mjolnir was orgasm inducing. And it's all capped off with a Tony Stark sacrifice and a goodbye to Captain America. So here we come to the heavyweight showdown. My thesis is that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is the greatest Marvel movie ever made, not because of the action and the characters and the scope, but because of the emotional impact of the movie. You might have different criteria, which I'll accept. My criteria is impact. So, Tony Stark's sacrifice versus saying goodbye to the Guardians of the Galaxy. Which one is more impactful? Look, we had our suspicions, but the writing wasn't blatantly on the wall that Tony Stark was going to die at the end of this movie. His death came as somewhat of a shock to us, with extra emphasis on the somewhat. Some of us saw it coming, some of us didn't. And that was by design, right? What makes his sacrifice so powerful is that we didn't see it coming, and he took out the most dangerous being in the universe by himself. I think what made Guardians 3 more impactful, though, was the fact that Rocket was in bad shape the entire movie. The specter of death hung over every single moment. And to stick the knife in even more, James Gunn sprinkled flashbacks of Rocket's life all throughout the runtime. What's worse, hearing someone you love died unexpectedly, or knowing that someone you love is going to die in the next couple days, weeks, or months? The long, drawn-out knowledge that someone is going to pass away soon is a torture that I don't wish on anybody. I would choose a quick and relatively painless death over a long and drawn-out, disease-ridden march to the grave any day. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 draws out that pain throughout its entire runtime. And we know also that this is the final time we're going to see the Guardians of the Galaxy just like this. For all these reasons, I think Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is the greatest Marvel movie ever made. It's sad, exhilarating, hilarious, and infinitely touching. This is what the perfect Marvel movie looks like. Action, stakes, brotherhood, sadness, humor, a great villain. This is it right here. It's fitting that James Gunn would give Marvel the greatest film it's ever created before heading off to DC and the DCU. Hey guys, if you like that video, please subscribe to my Substack. The link is down in the description. It's free. There's a written version of this video right there. Let me know down in the comments what you think about my hot take here. I'd love to hear your opinions on this. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel if you want more breakdowns like this.